Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the CASAS National News and Updates webinar on remote testing. This is Janice Farah, and I'm going to be giving you a few housekeeping tips, but for now, please welcome, get situated. We have a great presentation from Linda Taylor and Pat Rickard coming up this morning. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today is June 11th. This is the CASAS National News and Updates webinar on remote testing. We have a lot of people joining us, so let's just sit tight and wait until the top of the hour, and we will get started just as soon as possible. Thank you, everyone, and welcome. This is the CASAS National News and Updates webinar. I'm Janice Farah. Welcome. We're going to be presenting in just a few minutes, so please come in, get situated. There will be a recording of this webinar available. There's also a copy of the PowerPoint available right now. The PowerPoint is available on CASAS.org, and I'm sure someone will put that up in the chat box. Good afternoon from the Eastern Coast, definitely. And after the webinar is over, we have to do a little bit of a video magic on it, and then we will go ahead and put it also on CASAS.org on the website under News and Updates. Welcome, everyone. We're here today for the CASAS National News and Updates webinar on remote testing. We'll be getting started in just a few minutes. I see we've got 500 participants in with several more to go. So we're just going to wait until the top of the hour and get started. So good morning, everyone. Good afternoon to those on the East Coast. And welcome. We'll be getting started in just a couple minutes, so have a seat. And if you don't have a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, we're going to go ahead and put that in the chat box for you, and you can download it. It's on the CASAS.org website. There it is, under News and Updates. It's over on the far right-hand side. Let's see. I was going to bring it up, but I think you can find it. Linda, do you want to go through any of the basics on the chat and the housekeeping, or shall we wait until the hour?
I think let's wait to the top of the hour.
Very good. Thank you, everyone. I see many of you are putting your names and your agencies into the chat box. Thank you for that. We appreciate you pre-registering. That way we know how many to expect. And today is the CASAS National News and Updates webinar, June 11th, and we will be getting started in just a couple minutes. We want to welcome everyone today. We have many participants still joining the webinar, so we're not going to get started until things settle down just a little bit. We appreciate your attendance today at the CASAS National News and Updates webinar on remote testing. We're going to talk a little bit this morning about the difference between being in a Zoom webinar and a Zoom meeting. And this is what we call a Zoom webinar. Those instructions will be coming in just a moment. The question and answer box is really reserved for questions relating to the PowerPoint presentation. The chat box will be reserved for questions like, I can't hear, where is a copy of the presentation, and those kinds of things. And the answer to your question, someone asked, are we all muted? Yes. As you join the meeting, you are muted. And that's just part of basic management for us because we have so many participants today. But we'll be getting started in just a moment, and I'll go through some of the housekeeping tips, start to finish. Let's see, just another minute or so and we'll get going. If anyone can't hear me talking right now, but you see things scrolling by, a good tip is to check your audio settings in Zoom. Make sure that the headset or your internal speakers are set properly. There's also a volume setting in there as well. Okay. People are still joining. Welcome today. If you're just joining us, this is the CASAS National News and Updates webinar on remote testing. Yes. And I see there's a note if you can't hear. Oh, it just kind of scrolled by in the chat. Number of people are still in the waiting room, so we're getting started just as soon as we can. Hello and welcome. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is the CASAS National News and Updates webinar on remote testing. And my name's Janice Farah. We're going to be kicking things off at the beginning with just a little bit of housekeeping tips about Zoom webinars. You're all probably very familiar with Zoom. Zoom meetings are the most common type. Once you reach a certain number of participants, then it's best for us as an agency to switch to a Zoom webinar. And with that, we get a great addition, which is called the Q&A box. And that's a place that you can add questions about the presentation content, asking for clarification about training, etc. The chat box, however, is reserved for technical difficulties such as Zoom isn't working properly or I can't hear. I noticed that someone just raised their hand, and it's going to be very difficult with this many participants for us to respond when you raise your hand. It would be better if you do have a question to put it in the Q&A box if it's related to the PowerPoint presentation, or if it's related to I can't hear. If there's a chance that you could put it in the chat box, that would be great. If you'd like to get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation before we start, it's already available on CASAS.org. If you go over onto the right-hand side of the screen under News and Updates, you can click on that, and the first thing you'll see is the June 11th webinar on remote testing, and you can download a PDF, which is a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. That way you can follow along. Now, everybody should already be muted. I see that question in the Q&A box. That should already be in place. Now there's a number of people still joining. It's 11:03 Pacific time, but Linda, do you want to wait a little bit longer before we start? All right, let's get started. So welcome. This is the CASAS National News and Updates webinar on remote testing. Our presenters today include Pat Rickard, President of CASAS, Linda Taylor, Vice President of Assessment and Development, and my name is Janice Farah, National Technical Program Specialist. Welcome. So let's go through just a couple housekeeping slides quickly, and we will get started. Bullet number one, yes, your phones are automatically muted, and that's because we have such a big audience today. We want to go ahead and allow Linda to give the presentation, and then as we go through it, if you have technical difficulties about using Zoom, put those in the chat box. That's the best place for it. We have people from CASAS that are monitoring that, and they'll be able to assist you. If you have questions related to the presentation, however, put that in the Q&A box. If you're new to Zoom webinars, this is a great new feature. It allows us to keep copies of things, and we can go through the questions and answers afterwards. With this large of an audience, it'll be hard for us to answer them live, so we'll do our best in the chat box, and if we can't, then we'll post the questions and answers afterwards, again, on CASAS.org. Recording the webinar today, yes, that's a given for this many people. And I hope that answers the questions from the first slide. Next slide, please. Okay, here's a quick 1, 2, 3 of how to use Zoom before you start. Down at the bottom, at least on my screen, it's at the bottom. There's settings, audio settings, the ability to chat, and to click on the Q&A box. Audio settings allow you to control the volume, Next slide, please. Audio settings allow you to hear. If you're not loud enough, you can use the volume to set it up and down. Very simple to use. It's familiar if you've ever done use Zoom. Next slide, please. Now the chat, that's the place to request assistance. If you can't hear something or that you can't see where the PowerPoint is, that's where to check in the chat for that. Next slide, please. Finally, the Q&A box, that's questions for the presenter related to the content of what Linda and Pat are talking about. So if you have a question about training, you have a question about the guidelines, that's where to put the question and answer. And we'll try to get to as many as possible today. We might not get to all of you, so we apologize, but we will definitely post the questions and answers afterwards on CASAS.org. All right, so does that make sense? Next up, I would like to introduce Ms. Pat Rickard, President of CASAS.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the CASAS National Webinar Addressing Remote Testing, and thank you for joining us today. We are really grateful to all of you that have participated in discussions and pilot testing to address our current challenge of remote testing in this new era of COVID-19. And we are grateful to the state agency staff who have worked with us to ensure that the remote testing policies are viable within your states and will maintain the high quality, integrity, and the security of the remote testing. Our adult learners that we serve in our programs have multiple barriers to learning. And the lack of technology is a significant barrier in this era of distance learning and remote testing. We are encouraged that so many agencies have begun to pilot different options and explore what strategies might work for reaching our adult learners. We're prepared to continue working with you and support you as your state and local agencies develop a capacity to test distance learners and make remote testing a regular and essential part of the program. Together, we will continue to explore viable options for remote testing. Our agenda today addresses remote testing options and some successful strategies that agencies have reported. We will also share exciting possibilities for additional options to better serve our learners. Linda will share with you what we have learned and how we're going to move forward. Linda, over to you.
Thank you, Pat. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this national webinar. We're so thrilled to see 1,300 people. Wonderful. And we're so excited that you are all excited to learn about remote testing. It's been an amazing journey for us, and we're very eager to share it with you in this update. So I just want to begin by going over the agenda and be clear that the purpose of the webinar is informational. It's not a training per se. And I'm going to show you where we have all the materials that are very detailed for proctors to be able to actually do this. We're going to give an update of where we are with remote testing. We have a lot of new and updated materials to share with you. We have a new video that we're very thrilled to show today. We're going to talk more specifically about delivering remote testing. We're going to give you a couple of other CASAS updates about training and e-tests and TOPS for Enterprise, and then talk about next steps. And if you could possibly wait and hold your questions until later, because they may get answered during the session. If you really want to ask right away, please go ahead. But I would encourage you to listen first, and then there will be an opportunity at the end, and we'll stay on as long as you need to answer any remaining questions. So first of all, the overview. We'll start big with OCTAE, the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education in the U.S. Department of Ed. In April, they issued a memo that stated that there's flexibility in testing of NRS-approved assessments, and that states may allow programs to exempt students who are enrolled in distance education during this COVID-19 crisis, to exempt them from pre and post testing if it's not possible, which for many, many of our students, it has not been possible. And just recently, on May 29th, an additional memo came out from Octase, kind of emphasizing what they had already really said about flexibility in terms of pre and post NRS approved testing and exempting students. One thing that was a little bit new and additional in that memo is a suggestion that programs could use informal assessments for provisional placement in an NRS level for Table 4. And our understanding is that Octave wants to encourage all of you to provide distance learning, as many of you have been, continue to do that, and include as many students as possible for instruction, and not feel that it's necessary to do an NRS approved pretest for all of them that you're serving now, but that you can use an informal measure for now and put it in Table 4. Then when and if you are able to pretest those students, you can replace that level, that NRS level, if it's different. Every state has been asked by Octave to decide if they're going to allow or not allow remote testing. That is their prerogative. We understand and hope that each adult ed office will inform their funded agencies about whether it's allowed to do remote testing for NRS reporting purposes. And if you are considering doing remote testing, we ask you to please confirm with your state office if it's possible for your program, considering what funding stream you're under. If you're doing NRS reporting, please make sure that you know that it's accepted by your state. Another thing that Octave specified is that when programs are doing remote testing for NRS approved tests, it's extremely important to follow the test publisher's guidelines in these three major areas. One is student identification, making sure that the student you're testing is actually that person. Making sure that you ensure test security, and there's a lot around that. And then making sure that proctors are trained not only to give e-tests, which is the only way that they are allowed to do remote testing for NRS approved tests with e-tests, but also that they know how to use e-tests for remote proctoring. So please make sure that you train your proctors so that they're comfortable. Some of the benefits of remote testing I think may be obvious, but I will state them that at this point in time, between now and the end of the month, many of you are trying to do some post-testing, sometimes on a priority basis for various reasons to achieve MSGs. So I know some of you have been, many of you have been doing and trying out remote testing for that purpose. As you've been getting new students with such high employment, they are coming to us to get a baseline score for NRS reporting, to place them into distance learning instructional programs, and if you're in a workforce training program, to see if they're eligible for that training. We see remote testing as something that is going to add flexibility, whether or not you're going to keep doing it exclusively. If you open up your site, we hope that you will continue to do remote testing for your distance learners if they're unable to come in, and basically make remote testing a regular part of your program so that you can expand the reach and serve more students in different ways. The challenges, we know there are many, and I'm sure you could all at this moment chime in to add to the chorus of the challenges that are involved in remote testing, and we are well aware of them. Highest among them is equity concerns. And we've seen really starkly, I would say, that access to technology is a true concern for many of our adult learners. They don't have devices other than cell phones. Their bandwidth is often a concern, especially if they have others in the household who are competing for that limited bandwidth. Their home environment may have distractions. They may not be able to find a quiet place to test or feel comfortable allowing the proctor into their home. So even though it's virtual. So these are some of the challenges. Another one is that as we've begun our offerings of remote testing, And as you have started trying to do it, it's been easier to do it one-on-one. But of course, that comes at a price, because one proctor to one student is not the ratio you've been used to. You've been able to do up to 25. So currently, we do have a limit of 5, but we are looking into various ways. I'm going to share some of them with you to increase that. But in order, at this point in time, with the approaches that we have, we must make sure that we can maintain test security. And so as a result, we are putting a limit of 5, and we understand that there are high staffing costs involved with that. There are, with this remote testing, new procedures for you to learn and train your staff on and get familiar with, so that's another challenge. So one of the things that has happened since we last updated you is that we're hearing more and more variations on the theme, and some emerging and very promising new assessment scenarios that have come out of this pandemic. So first, I want to characterize them a little bit. Remote testing only is what we've been sharing and continue to offer, and that is 1-to-1, one proctor, one test taker, or one proctor with multiple test takers, up to 5 currently. Another emerging scenario, as some programs are opening up, if only slightly, is that testing can take place on site in one room. So that room could be a computer lab that has social distancing, which means that you could not test your usual 20 to 25, but you could test more than 5. Another very promising practice that, by the way, we're going to be presenting some presentations in the near future from agencies that have tried some of these things. And one of these very promising scenarios is to test in parking lots with students in cars. So it's on site and with a Wi-Fi hotspot, and there you can use the laptops that your program has, and it really opens up the ability to test more students at a time, and for the students to have the equipment that they need. Another emerging solution is hybrid, where it's both on-site and remote, and that can take different forms. One is the proctor is on-site, and that can be helpful because the proctor at home may not have a large enough screen, may not have a very good laptop. So if the proctor is on site, they can use that equipment, and that they can then do remote testing with students who may be all off-site or at home. Another possible scenario is the proctor is on site, and there are some test takers in that room, the computer lab, let's say, but there may be others who are in another room in the same building. So in a sense, that's why it's offsite. It's hybrid, because the proctor is seeing some of those students face-to-face, but the others are remote to the proctor. They're in a different room. So that would be remote testing in a hybrid fashion. So I'm sure we'll be seeing more and more of these solutions, but wanted to share them with you and give you some ideas. CASAS began remote testing in April. We rolled it out in May, and here we are in June. And we're very excited to share with you some of the things that we are exploring as next steps. We're going to go over the phase 2 materials and share with you how they've been updated. But I do want to give you some hope for the future here, that in response to the Octave memo, we are about to provide for you what we're calling a reading level indicator. It's not an appraisal, it's not a locator. It's actually, it works like an appraisal, but it's not officially an appraisal. And what it would do is give an informal placement into an educational functioning level for ABE or ESL, and allow you to provisionally place those levels, those student levels, into your federal table 4. So that's a tool that we see that you need, and we're very soon going to be able to provide you with that free resource. So it will be available without a cost. Then another innovation that we're looking at, we know that you've all told us numerous times that, and we've seen that students have smartphones almost universally. So we know that our listening tests are audio only, especially for the levels B and C. So we're looking into and going to provide you guidance to provide the listening tests on smartphones. So that's coming soon. Please don't try it yet unless you'd like to be a pilot site for this. But as soon as we can come up with good guidelines for that, we will share it with you, and hopefully that's very soon. We're looking into more options for multiple test takers, not only how to do it, but how many at a time. We're going to show you some videos, and we're developing additional ones, and that helps to deliver it more easily. And as I mentioned, we're going to have some promising practices demonstrations and sessions to have your fellow practitioners share with you how they are going about doing this. And if you want to get involved and help us pilot or use some of these methods, we're creating user groups where we can get feedback and give feedback and keep developing. Now, in terms of our updates, I hope you all know, and if you don't, you're about to find out, that all of our remote testing resources are on one page on the CASAS website at casas.org. And we have a new document there called Remote Testing Updates. And this is where we are on a continuous basis listing all the changes that, that are being made. And here is a list of the various documents and materials that are there. Right now, and again, I want to reassure you all, this is going to be available recorded on the website. But I want to go to the website right now and show you that here's the home page. And if you see on the right, under what's new, there's a great big remote testing place to click. And just below that, I want to point out that here we're putting some updates on what's going on as well. But if you click on remote testing, it takes you to that page. And here you can see this new document called Remote Testing Updates. I'm going to click on that. And this gives a short description of the things that have recently been updated. So the last one was on June 2nd. We updated the guidelines and the quick reference guides. And here's a little description of all those things. So this is how you can keep abreast of what is new. We also have the video that we're going to show you today, which you can get from here. We now have Proctor training and certification. The training is really through the documents on this page, but the certification is in a Moodle type course where if your state requires it or if your local program decides to require Proctor certification, this is a resource that you can use to do that through the CASAS website. And this link will take you there. Our webinars, today's webinar will be able to be viewed from here as soon as it's done. Then in this first box here, we have some general documents. The first one is about registering testing stations remotely. And this is a step-by-step PDF that walks you through with screenshots about how to do this. And actually, so this is new, and this is something we're going to show you in a little video today. So we also have the PDF written guidance. We have a summary chart that I'm going to show you in a little bit. We have a going remote checklist. We have FAQs that we pretty much tripled when we updated them about a week ago. Then we have 4 boxes with the 4 different approaches to remote testing. The first one is a one-on-one, one proctor, one student. We call it remote control. And here are the guidelines for it. And here's the quick reference guide for it. So the guidelines, I'm going to just take a second and get that. And you can see that it has a table of contents. You can easily find things. Pardon my scrolling, but it has all the technical requirements for this approach. It also gives you step-by-step, instructions in this part B about exactly what to say, what to do. And at the end, we have a new sample letter that you can send to your students to tell them about what to expect and what's going to happen when they are set up and scheduled for remote testing. And I want to give a shout out to one of our pilot sites in Nebraska who did a very great version of this, and we adapted a little bit and have now added it to our guidelines. So this will give you an idea of what you might include in this letter when you begin or as you keep going with your testing. And for every approach, we have this quick reference guide. So once you've studied, and I do mean studied, the guidelines, please do, you can use this quick reference guide to, which is just a 2-page step-by-step guide that you can refer to more easily, which also has some scripting in it, so you don't have to keep going back to the guidelines for that, but about exactly how to go about the process. In addition, when you're getting started, we ask every agency to complete an agency remote testing agreement, and for every proctor, and that is what you submit to CASAS, and for every proctor to submit the a proctor remote testing agreement. So these are documents I'm going to talk about in just a minute as well on the PowerPoint. So let me go back there. All right. So delivering remote testing. As I just pointed out, we do have 4 approaches. 2 of them are one-to-one, the remote control and the oral responses. 2 of them are with multiple test takers. They each have detailed step-by-step scripts and technical requirements. So now we have just made a video that focuses on, it actually shows the first approach, remote testing one-on-one with remote control. But it is also helpful, even if you're not in your program going to do that approach, it will give all of you an idea of what this looks like for the proctor, what it looks like for the student, and you'll be able to see the initial steps that are in common with all of the approaches where you interact with the student, get their ID, etc. So now I'm going to turn it over to Karen to have her start the video now.
CASAS remote testing is an easy and flexible method for delivering remote assessments to your adult education students. In this video, we show a proctor preparing a student to take a CASAS reading assessment, following the one-to-one remote control guidelines, and then administering that test. Prior to this, the school has sent the student an email with instructions for connecting with their proctor using a web conferencing platform at a specific time. It describes the computer hardware that is supported and a reminder about showing their identification. This helps the process go more smoothly. In this example, the student and proctor are both using Zoom.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'll be proctoring your reading test today. First, let's make sure that your computer or tablet is ready. This should take about 5 minutes.
Do you understand?
Yes.
After we finish that step, I'll start your assessment. I'll be online with you through the entire process and answer any questions you have. The test will be running on my computer, but
You'll see the questions on your computer and type the answers.
I'll be here to help, so don't worry.
Do you understand?
Yes.
First, I need to check your ID. Can you please show it to me and say your name?
My name is Ricardo Jimenez.
Thanks, Ricardo.
Next, let's check your internet connection.
Please open a web browser. Got it?
Okay, please type in this link.
www.speedtest.net.
And click Go.
Is it running? Tell me the numbers when it's done, please.
52 download, 11.5 upload.
Great, that will be fine. Now please close that browser. And next I'll need you to close any other applications that are open on your computer. But please be sure to leave Zoom running.
Let me know when you're done.
Got it.
Let's do a quick screen share so I can confirm everything is closed and ready to test. I'll stop sharing my screen and you click on the green Zoom Share Screen button and select All. Okay, that's fine. You can stop sharing. Click the red Zoom Stop Sharing button. Last step before we get started. I need you to show me that your desktop has no papers and that there's no one else in the room with you while you take your test, okay? Please pick up your computer or your webcam
And show me the whole room that you're in. Yeah, move it around so I can see all of it.
Great, thank you.
Let's try to use the remote control functions next.
First, I'm going to share my screen with you. Can you see the eTest's login screen? Now you're going to make a temporary change in Zoom so you can use my computer. In the Zoom toolbar, do you see View Options? It might be up at the top.
Yes, I can see it.
Please click View Options and select Request Remote Control and confirm it. Try moving your mouse and clicking. This is how you'll answer questions on your test.
Yes, that works.
Would you like to practice answering a couple test questions using your mouse?
If the student says yes, the proctor loads the eTest sampler. The student clicks through several questions to practice. If the student says no, then you may continue to the assessment.
Okay, now your computer is ready. Before we start, I need to review the 5 rules with you. You need to answer yes or no to each question. Do you understand?
Yes, understand it.
First, you'll need to keep your webcam on during the test. I'll be watching while you take the test, and if you have a question for me, you can just wave your hand. But just know that the video will not be recorded. Do you understand?
Yes.
And then number 2, is anyone else in the room with you? For test security, you must be the only person in the room when you're testing.
Okay, yeah, nobody else is here.
Number 3, will you take the test by yourself? No helpers.
Yes.
Okay. Number 4, you cannot use notes, books, or your computer to find the answers. Do you agree?
Yes.
And finally, number 5, you cannot take a picture, copy, or share any test prompts, questions, or answers. Do you agree?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, we're done with the rules. Please turn off your cell phone. Can you show it to me so I can see that it's off? Great, thank you. All right, let's get started with the test. The purpose of taking the test is to find out what you need to learn. It's important that you do your best on the test. You should be able to finish the test in about 1 hour. And if you do not know the answer, please do not guess. Instead, just continue to the next question without answering it. If you finish early, you may review your answers before ending the test. Do you have any questions?
Nope.
Is this your name?
Yes, that's me.
Great. You can go ahead and start the test.
While the student is testing, the proctor is watching the student's movements and the room around them. The student should stay seated and no one should enter the room. The proctor can see the student's progress answering the questions via the CASAS eTest session manager console.
Okay, I'm done.
Yes, I can see you're done with the test from my computer here as well. Great. So go ahead and click the log out button. Do you have any questions before we end our session today?
Nope, I'm just glad I'm done.
Great job. I'll send your results to your teacher, and I'll go ahead and end the Zoom session now. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
As you can see, CASAS remote testing is an easy and flexible method for delivering remote assessments to your adult ed students. On our website, you'll find detailed documentation and other training resources. Please be sure to refer to them often. The guidelines documents are especially important. They contain Proctor scripts as well as the technical and environmental requirements for remote testing. Many different devices have been approved for proctors and students. This chart shows the current list. If you have any additional questions, please email us or call. We are here to assist you. Thank you for choosing CASAS for your remote assessment needs.
All right. So I hope that was helpful for everyone. We know that this is not how you will be able to interact with all of your students, especially your ESL students. And it's possible, as always, to use the native language if you possibly can in all of the introductory parts of the session. But if not, you know, you can simplify your language, and or perhaps you can arrange for the student to meet with someone who does speak their language to get set up, and then have the proctor do the actual testing. So we know that there are challenges with lower level students, and we are looking to collect promising practices to address them. This is that chart that was shown on the video just now, and it shows the four approaches. I'm not going to, well, actually, I'm going to quickly go through through each of them, and then we'll go back and you'll be able to understand it a bit better. But it shows all of the different aspects of each approach. So in the remote control, that's one-on-one, the test is given through the proctor's device, and that device at this point must be a Windows 10 PC that is registered for testing, and the web conferencing platform that you use needs to have not only screen sharing, but also a feature called remote control, which is in Zoom, and that's the example that we use in the guidelines. Other platforms have that, but if the platform doesn't have it, then you cannot use this approach. You can use another approach one-on-one. I'll show you in a minute. But the test taker then, with this remote control, can answer and enter their answers on their own device. The proctor is looking at the student the whole time with the webcam, and that's how it's being monitored. And the internet connection is 2 megabytes per second or faster, which is not very high, but still may be challenging for some of our students. You've seen that we're actually already up to 2.2, version 2.2, and this is what the screen looks like for the proctor. Now, the second and third approaches are with multiple test takers, and this is where the test taker is on a PC with Windows 10, which we know that's not very common for our students at home, but in a solution like testing in students' cars in the parking lot, they can use the program's PC. So this is a solution that you can use with that testing in cars, or if students are at home and they do have a PC. So the test taker has to register their computer, and we're going to show you a new way to do that. That's very simple. So they can enter the answers on their device. They can use a variety of devices, though. The proctor can, that is. For this approach too, the student has to have a Windows 10 PC. You can test up to 5 students at a time. And again, you need the bandwidth. In approach 3, this is where Chromebooks or iPads can be used by the student, but they must be in a special mode. And for Chromebooks, it's called kiosk mode. For iPads, it's called guided access mode. So if your program does happen to have Chromebooks, and can control them, then, or iPads, you can take advantage of this approach. And it's otherwise similar to the second approach. In the fourth approach, this is one-on-one. This is really the most basic way you could do this. And the student can use a Chromebook or an iPad. The proctor needs a Windows 10 PC because they're going to have e-tests on their computer, and they only need to share their screen with a test taker. And then, very simply, the student is going to say their answers out loud to the proctor, and the proctor then enters their answers right on their computer into e-tests. So this is easy, both for the proctor and the test taker, so it's a fallback. It is only one-on-one, but it's something that you can do quite simply. With multiple test takers, the way it works, and we haven't shown that in the video, but at least in Zoom, there's something called breakout rooms, and they're private. Other platforms have these too. And so you put each of the test takers in their own breakout room. The proctor then circulates from room to room, and if they monitor and if the test taker needs assistance, they can give it to them. So you can have different configurations of this than one proctor and 5 test takers. They can, as they do in your on-site programs, they could take more than one test form at a time. They could be taking different forms. So that's an advantage to this as well. So then back to this summary, maybe it makes a little more sense to you now. We can have different approaches. Some of them, they're all one-to-one possibly, but some of them, the 2 middle ones, are possible with multiple test takers. The proctor's device can vary as to in terms of who registers the test on their computer, what kind of device they need for the proctor or the test taker. It's again this last one that has the most options for students. So you can see these specifications and which web platform you can use. We also recommend, though it is only optional, but it's recommended that you have a smartphone set up on the side that the student, if they can have their own phone set up so that you can see better what's going on with the student. So that's an additional test security measure, which is optional. These are the CASAS tests that you can use for remote testing. Of course, the goals series and the life and work are the NRS approved ones. You can also use appraisals if that's what your program needs. And in California, you can use that citizenship test. I mentioned earlier, we have the agency remote testing agreement that all programs must submit before they are permitted to begin remote testing as far as CASAS is concerned. And then we ask every proctor to complete this form and keep it on file in your local program so that they basically agree to follow all of the privacy, test security, and other protocols in our guidelines. And the same is true, of course, with that agency agreement that when you sign it, you are agreeing that you have read the guidelines and you agree to adhere to them. We have a going remote checklist, and the one on the website has links to the various documents. So this is to give you an idea of how to get started with remote testing. What are the steps involved? The most important one, in a way, is to make sure you try it first. Get really comfortable. Try it with colleagues before you try it with students, and then go remote. There are a lot of suggestions for getting the student comfortable on either the day before or on the same day of the test, to meet with them in advance. And as I mentioned, that could be in the native language, or you can take as much time as you need to make sure all of these conditions and situations are in place. And then on testing day, you do need to do a few things to ensure that it's the person you're testing that you think it is, authenticate their identity, scan the room, and give the test. So as you saw in some of these solutions, it requires the proctor or the student to register their station in order to give e-tests. And we have a new approach that enables you to register that station, that computer or device with a code. This is something like when you forget your password on an app and a code is sent to your cell phone and then you enter that code. So this is a similar kind of process. And so that's one way to register a station remotely. Another one is with credentials, as you have always done if you're familiar with eTests already. Or if a proctor already has a test station that has been registered, they can simply use that test station and add it to the remote testing session. But right now, we're going to share with you a new how-to video demonstration that goes through this process of registering the station with a code. And I'm sorry we had that black mark in the middle. It's hopefully we won't have that again, but it's not in the actual video. But okay, so Karen, you can go ahead and share that now.
To register testing stations remotely, proctors will log into their CASAS eTests account as normal.
Karen, we need to see a different screen.
They will click Start next to the testing session.
Can you start it over, please?
To register testing stations remotely, proctors will log into their CASAS eTests account as normal. They will click Start next to the testing session they would like to begin. When they do this, two options appear: to start an on-site session or to start a remote session. This generates a 6-digit code the proctor will need to share with the test taker. The test taker will input this code to register their computer. The test taker will need to go to etestsonline.org and click Register this computer. The test taker will need to select Register Station with Code and input the 6-digit code from their proctor. The station is registered and the student is ready to test. Proctors can also share with their student ID code that they may put in. The student's screen will have this message until the proctor enables the test. The proctor will be able to see when the student has logged in. They will need to click Enable Test so that the student can begin testing.
Okay, so hopefully that is going to give you an idea of how to do this. We have not yet posted this video on our website, But as soon as we do, we'll do that in the next day or so, you'll be able to view it as many times as you like. And we also, as I mentioned earlier, we do have a PDF document with step-by-step screenshots that also explains how to do this. If you're doing just one-on-one testing, remote testing, this may not be something you have to do, but if you want to test with multiple students, you do need to learn this part. All right, let's look now at some local program considerations. First of all, when you're thinking of doing remote testing, you need to see in your own program what's going to work for you. You can use more than one of these remote testing approaches. You could look at hybrid, on-site and remote options, as we talked about earlier. You can involve other staff like intake clerks or tech support who can help to facilitate the process, or it can be only the proctor. But one way to facilitate it is to involve other staff. And you can use native language before the test begins to support lower level ESL learners so they can get comfortable with the technology and all the procedures to do this. Here is an example, just one example, but something that was shared with us by one of our pilot sites, and that's Karen Cook from Austin Community College in Texas. In this example, they have chosen to have someone called a moderator be a kind of intake clerk. So the students come into a waiting room on Zoom, and the moderator works with them. And then as they get checked in, the moderator assigns the student to a proctor in one of the breakout rooms. And that could be one-on-one with the proctor, or it could be in the waiting room it could be with multiple students testing at the same time with one proctor. So this is one scenario that we thought might be helpful to share. There are other things to consider when you look at doing testing with multiple students. The web conferencing platform needs to have these breakout rooms, and it has to be equipped with both audio and video. Decide if you want to use a moderator or how many proctors you're going to involve. You have to see how are you going to get the student the link to the Zoom or whatever platform it is, how they're going to enter the testing event. If tech issues come up, what's your backup plan? Karen suggests having scripts for both the moderators and the proctors so they have a very clear, I would say, idea of what to do and to state their roles clearly, and to take time to develop trainings and practice time with the staff before you actually get started. So, now is a good time before the new school year begins, the new program year, to really try out remote testing and try out all these options. In terms of doing remote testing, we really want to emphasize that the basic rules of giving e-tests and monitoring still apply. So you must collect cell phones, or in this case, ensure that they're off, as you saw in the video. If you're doing even something like testing in cars in a parking lot, you still have to have proctors circulating to monitor, but still maintaining social distance, but nonetheless circulating. We recommend that you start small and scale up as your proctors get more comfortable. As we mentioned, it's a 1-to-5 ratio now, but if you're doing a hybrid approach, you may be able to test more at a time, but never more than 25. And I think you really need to see what's going to be comfortable for the proctor to be able to manage on their screen. In general, we ask you to be creative, be innovative, but please do follow these very detailed guidelines and don't take liberties unless you want to check with us and make sure that they are appropriate and would maintain the required protocols for test security. We have a few quotes to share with you from people who've tried it. They're emphasizing how important it is to practice. This registration code is getting some kudos. And I really appreciated that it's Linda Chanfera from Novi Adult School in Michigan who is doing such an amazing job with this testing in cars model, she kept saying, where there's a will, there's a way. And I think that's something that hopefully will inspire all of you, that as you try to think about how to approach this and tackle this new way of testing, that you keep this in mind. I want to give you a couple of updates very quickly. The CASAS implementation training Moodle modules are being updated and revamped. We've changed them to better meet the needs of the field. They're geared now for specific roles that people have in the testing process. They provide more detailed guidance as a result for whatever role you have. And also there's one for teachers. So we're shooting to roll these out July 1, and you go to training.casas.org. So this is going to replace the online basic implementation training that many of you are using now. And this slide shows a little description of each of the modules. The first one is an introduction that everyone takes. The second one focuses on implementing e-tests. The third one focuses on paper testing. And the fourth one is about how to interpret the test results. And this shows that if you're going to only be doing e-test and you're a tester, you would do modules 1 and 2. If you're only doing paper in your agency, you're doing 1 and 3. But in each of these cases, we recommend module 4, which is interpreting the results. If you're doing both e-tests and paper, you have to do all the modules, and of course 4 is recommended. And if you are a teacher, a counselor, we recommend both 1 and 4. We're going to be at some of the virtual conferences coming up, and we'll be able to answer your questions about many things there at COABE, at NOB, the Workforce Board Conference, and at TSOL. And now I'm going to quickly pass it over to Janice, who's going to tell you a little bit about e-tests and TOPS for Enterprise right now.
Thanks, Linda. Yes, as Pat said, it's a journey. And as TOPS Pro Enterprise and e-tests have been evolving, I just wanted to share a couple of points today. The first one is about force majeure. Yes, it was released in TOPS Pro Enterprise Build 75 back in April. And that's the ability to document a student that was impacted due to COVID in this situation where they were unable to be tested. And Octave requested that we put this in there, and the different states, as I've been talking to them, have been implementing them slightly differently. So please wait for guidance from your state on how they would like you to implement. In California, we have certain guidelines, and elsewhere. So, but in general, it's marked on the student record, and it's just a simple checkbox. So next slide, please. We also have additional fields on the test record, and these notes here are for data managers, administrators, and proctors, because each of you have a different view into e-tests and TOPS Pro. So data managers, we already discussed force majeure. We've done numerous webinars talking about distance learning and how you can mark classes or students for distance learning. Please refer to those videos if you have any questions about marking attendance for remote instruction. Administrators will want to also note, this is a brand new thing, when an e-test is given remotely, starting about 2 weeks ago, it will be marked with a flag that says remote test equals yes. You can look in TE under records under tests and see that information, or you can go into run reports under the CASAS e-tests and look up your test administrations and see that they're in there. Now, if you happen in California, let's say, this is just a little note, California agencies, if you've been doing our special COAP assessments, or nationwide, if you've been doing the CIT, Citizenship Preparation Assessments, you can mark that field, remote test equals yes, manually to mark that the test was done in a different kind of environment than the traditional in a classroom situation. Finally, proctors, remote station registration using a code. Linda's already covered that in detail, but that's something part of the updates that we've been working on in the last 2 months to try to facilitate remote testing for all of our agencies. That's it. Back to you, Linda.
Thank you. All right, so to wrap up here, I just want to say that we are very excited to have a lot of new things that we're working on. One, as I mentioned, is this reading level indicator. It's a 28-question test that you can use for informal placement and to find out what the estimated NRS level for your students and use that to populate your federal table 4 until you're able to actually give an NRS pretest. Smartphones, we're looking into it, how to make the layout work. We know our students are very proficient in using their smartphones, but we need to make sure that we can provide the test in a way that it will truly work on smartphones and give all of you guidance in any aspects of doing it with a smartphone that we've already seen some. So we're coming up with some guidelines for that and hope soon that we can release that guidance and give you the go signal to start using smartphones with our listening tests. Then we are actively looking into more options for testing more than 5 or at least up to 5 test takers in different ways and perhaps with more than 5. We're going to be making more of these short video demonstrations, and we're also planning to make one that would be a very short one that you could share with students in advance to give them an idea of what to expect. We are going to be reaching out to practitioners who have been trying out remote testing and have come up with some great ideas that they can share with you. And we'll be doing some Zoom webinars on that in the very near future. And would invite you to also contact us if you'd like to be in a user group, perhaps to try out using listening with smartphones, for example, to help us work through the kinks with some of these new approaches with multiple test takers. As I think you have seen, we always do pilot testing with any innovation, and we rely on the input from the field before we release anything to make sure that it's working as it ought to. So we're excited, and we know there are many things that we can keep going with to make this remote testing expand, become more available to our students in terms of what they have. And we know you're looking perhaps with some trepidation at starting up the school year and how are you going to test all the students that you need to, and we understand that. And that's why we are trying to come up with some additional ways that you'll be able to test more students with more devices. So please stay tuned. We'll be doing another one of these update webinars. And please do look on the CASAS website on the remote testing page for those updates. As they come out, you'll be able to stay abreast of them. Finally, we are recording the webinar, and if we didn't get to your question today, we will stay on now and answer any questions, but we'll be posting the webinar and the PowerPoint on the CASAS website. If you would like to get involved in a user group, go to remote testing at casas.org. If you need tech support, you know where to go. And if you want, yes, if you want to be in a user group, there you go. So if you have any additional questions and comments, please post them in the Q&A. And otherwise, thank you very much for attending today. me just ask, Richard, is there anything you would like to add in answer to any of the questions that have been coming up for those who are still here?
Oh, so if there's any in particular you want to point me to, I'd be glad to.
Richard, this is Janice. I think one of the questions people were looking for was a little bit of clarification about the reading level indicator. If you are at a point that you can share about that. I was under the impression we were still developing the actual implementation details of that, but maybe you have a couple other thoughts you'd want to share.
So we've already assembled the test, and actually Linda can speak to that, and it's already being piloted, I believe, in paper form. Is that right, Linda?
Yes. So it's something that we will be, we're still figuring out exactly how we're going to be making it available. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, we were planning to have it available electronically very soon.
Hmm.
Were there other questions, Janice?
Digging around. The question I've seen a few times about Zoom versus Zoom that you have to pay for versus GoToMeeting or Google Meet. Are you, is the development team or the Q&A group planning to expand beyond Zoom for their?
Oh, it's fine to use other tools besides Zoom. So we're not at all committed to Zoom. You just need to make sure that it has the features. And if you're doing one-to-one, it has to have that remote control feature. But as long as it does, yes, you certainly do not have to use Zoom. Any other tool similar is okay.
And as you expand to multiple, like a one-to-many, 1 to 3 or 5, that's when the breakout rooms with the ability to communicate with the proctor come into play. Is that correct?
Yes.
I see there's a question about a multiple test taker video. We were considering doing that, but because we are looking at various additional options for that, we are going to postpone that and looking to do that later in the year. So stay tuned. But in the meantime, we will be providing some additional support materials for the approaches that are working.
Looking through some of the Q&A, see if there's a common thread.
Yeah, and again, about the informal placement exam, I know everyone's very eager to have it, but it's just not quite ready yet. So please be patient and we'll get it, make it available as soon as possible. And you can just keep checking into the remote testing page for updates about that as well as other things.
There's a technical question regarding Chromebooks in kiosk mode. Is that documented, or would it be better to contact technical support to get the details on that?
Technical support is definitely the best, and I think they'll have some documentation they can share as well.
There's a question about the level indicator test in relation to the locator. The locator is different, and it's still basically the vehicle for getting into a pre-test and e-test, and that remains the same. The level indicator test is an informal assessment made up of practice items, and you cannot get a scale score for it, but it's a way to get an estimated NRS level to be able to provisionally place a student into a level and into table 4.
Richard, the reading level indicator assessment, that would be administered similarly to the way that the e-tests would be administered rather than coming off the website like the sampler does?
Yeah, you know, it's kind of a hybrid there, and that's why we're still putting it together. So it is actually going to use the e-test engine, but it'll be accessed in a little bit different way. And we're also probably going to have an invitation wizard where someone can send an invite to the student to take that test. So those are all things we're working on to put together very quickly and make that offer. I see a question, has anyone done this yet? And there's a lot of people already doing the 4 approaches that we discussed today, and they're already using the code and they're already doing a number of new features. But there's also a lot of things that are being piloted and that are being added that haven't been done yet. So we're sort of in a state of change, as we've noted, but definitely people are already doing remote testing.
If there's anyone from tech support on the line, the very top question in the Q&A box about informal placement exams available on the CASAS website. I recall there's one off the top of my head. I can pull a URL if anyone in tech support happens to have that.
Janice, you're going in and out. Can you repeat what you said?
Sure. If there's anyone from technical support that's on the line, the very top question in the Q&A box from Neela Hamdani asking about on the CASAS website, the location for the indicator tests, if anyone happens to have that URL. Otherwise, Neela, we'll get back to you after this is over with. I'll dig it out for you.
Well, there is no, the indicator test doesn't exist yet. It's not available yet.
Yeah, that's what we're working on.
No, I mean the informal assessment questions is
Yes,
what I was referring to.
it doesn't exist yet anywhere on the website. There's a question about third-party vendors. We have made the decision so far not to go with any third-party vendors like Examity or Proctor because of the cost of them. And so for that reason, we're asking you to use your own proctors and train them. Yeah, there's a question about this informal, the level indicator test is going to be not, it will be unsecured. So it doesn't have all of the requirements of the formal remote testing for NRS approved tests. And that's so that you'll be able to more easily give it to more students and just get a preliminary notion of their level. This question about proctor training is you can go on the CASAS website and do the proctor training. You don't have to have participated in the pilot. We're beyond the pilot now. We're into full rollout. Yes, the question about using phones for additional monitoring. Yes, so if you decide to use the phone for that additional monitoring, then of course you would not have them turn it off. You would ask them to, you would be connecting with the student through Zoom on their phone in that situation.
If a test gets interrupted because of interconnection or so on, it'll have the same capability as e-tests in that if the test can be resumed, the student will pick up from the item where they left off. So you're still having e-tests in the background and it still has that capability. If the student has to come back another day, then the test will resume from the point where the student was broken off.
Diane, I'm not sure what you're asking when you're saying, do you understand can you be more specific? I'm not sure maybe you can repeat the question.
I got that one. That was a follow-up on the Proctor U Proctorio question. And so
okay, great.
following up with remote testing at CASAS.org, and we will have the right people.
Great. The answer to Kimberly is yes.
Is that approach 4, Linda?
Chromebook with multiple test takers. That's 2 or 3. I'm trying to find the slide number with the chart on it. Approach 3. Slide 30.
To Jonathan, yes, e-test does always know about the last test that a student took, no matter how old it is. So it's really up to the agency whether you're going to, give them appraisal if it's been too long. But in any case, e-test will know the last level the student was at. To answer Alex, yes, that is one of the approaches. That's where you have the remote control option in Zoom. For Jonathan, I don't think it's possible for the proctors to see the screen of the students. They're able to monitor where the student is in progress from their own proctor screen. So they know that the student's on item 13 of 25, that sort of thing. But they can't see the student's screen.
Well, Linda, it looks like we've pretty much mopped up the Q&A section, and the chat has slowed down also. Oh, one more.
That's right, Jonathan, that the proctors don't see the test page that the student sees. The only way you could do that is if they have, their cell phone separately set up to show the screen while they're taking the test. That would be the only way. The proctor will have their own script to get this test started, but they don't read the directions to the student. The student sees the directions and reads the directions themselves. That's correct. The proctor is watching the student. Just as in a Zoom call, you see the face of the person that you're speaking with in the Zoom call. That's how it is in the remote proctoring as well.
Hi, everyone. I lost power, but I'm back.
We've been answering while you were gone, Linda. It seems to be going fine.
Great. Mhm. Looks like we've come to the end of the questions. Shall we close?
Yeah, for everyone, the Q&A will be available on the website, and we'll be still answering them after this session, so there'll be a complete list available later.
Karen, we could end the session, I think.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.